Francis, thank you so much for being the guest at our Product Leader series. I'm looking forward to have this conversation with you. Excited to have you on the show. And please go ahead and give us a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and what excites you. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Frances. I actually started my career in finance. So I did 4 years of investment banking, 2 years of investment banking, 2 years of private equity. And then after about 4 years in finance, I realized it's not what I want to do. So I did a pretty big pivot from that, from private equity investing to tech product manager. So I started at Amazon as a senior product manager in their payments team. I don't know if folks have the 5% Amazon co-brand credit card with Chase. I was one of the product managers on that credit card, working on kind of exclusive experiences for the card members. And then about a year in, for a bunch of different reasons, I then pivoted to Alexa. So now more as a technical product manager, that's the official title, and also made a personal move back to the Bay Area. So originally was in Seattle. So I'm now working on integration between Alexa and a search. So the experience is essentially you can start asking product questions by typing on the Amazon search bar, which didn't exist before our team started working on that feature. In terms of what excites me, I think, I'm still relatively new in my product career, 2 years into it, and now on my second team, so, second kind of product. I've been really excited about just learning about new things every day. I think with both of my team, there have been lots of different challenges and new things that come in. With COVID, for example, lots of different teams at Amazon have a huge impact on that, including a lot of teams in Alexa. And kind of see how that macro trends all get surfaced into what we do every day has been super exciting and energizing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. And I know you are traveling right now and you still agreed to be on this show. So I really appreciate that. You're dialing in from London. Is that true?
Actually France, but yeah, in the
yeah,
European
yeah.
time zone.
Is there?
It's 4 p.m. So not very, not
Cool.
very hard.
Friday, last thing on Friday for you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So let's dive into this. You have an very interesting career pivot, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how did you one, what is your day like, and then more importantly, I think our audience would be interested in hearing people who are in your shoes. How did you make that pivot from being in finance to being a technical product manager? So one, I'd love to hear just your day, like what is your day as a technical product leader? And then maybe if you can articulate a little more on how did that pivot happen and some strategies and tactics for people to follow along if they want to make that pivot. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts there. And I'll try to turn off my video so we can just see you and we'll see how that works.
Yeah, sounds good. No problem. Yeah, so in terms of what my day is like, I think for most of the PMs, our day is probably kind of divided into two parts. One is meeting times, one is deliverable time. And the meeting time can really varies, but for me, it's probably about 50 to sometimes 70%. And now we have no meeting days, so which helps. But yeah, pretty substantial amounts of kind of blocks of time in my day. And then in terms of what kind of meetings, usually there are some recurring ones. There's usually the daily stand-up with the tech team. There's usually a bunch of weekly, every week or bi-weekly meetings that fall throughout the week. And that could be business metrics reporting to just program reports that usually I attend regularly. And then there's also kind of ad hoc meetings that's usually meeting with either internal stakeholders, which would mean it's our own engineering team or design team, data science, marketing, finance. And usually there, I'm just trying to drive alignment, answering questions, making sure that I'm unblocking my teams on achieving whatever work streams that they're working on. And then there's a set of usually external stakeholders. So on my current team, since I'm working on integration between two large organizations, Search and Alexa, there's lots of alignment and help and support that we need from our partner teams. So I'm usually the one that's driving all those alignments, and those just generally happen, from the data perspective, generally happen through a lot of these meetings. And in the meetings, we tend to, for example, we might review some analysis or review a short doc and then just start discussion. And then on my previous team, sometimes external partner can mean even partners outside their own company. So previously, when I was in payments, since most of the payments work a lot with financial institutions, so that might mean meeting with folks outside of Amazon. So that's my meeting time. And then I have the deliverable time, which is where I actually get to do my own work. And then as a product manager, I'm not the one that's kind of coding up the product, but a lot of time it's kind of, first driving through your overall product thinking. That's with leadership, with your own internal team. And that usually comes through, at least at Amazon, lots of doc writing. I know at other company might be PowerPoints, but essentially you're kind of outlining your ideas down and then get alignment from, leadership that this is what we're building. This is how we're thinking about it. You get the resource, and then, then you have the team to go and build whatever you're working on. That might also mean just replying to email, which might sound trivial, but it actually takes up, pretty substantial amount of time, that you're just answering questions from different teams for your own, it might be just from your own tech team or your own design team. And also lots of time dedicated to answering like Slack messages or chat messages in real time to basically unblock your team to do a lot of different things. So yeah, that's concretely how the day is usually broken down. And I think in terms of like, what's the nature of those work streams or what's the nature of the meeting, that really depends on kind of where you are in the product lifecycle, and happy to go into that into a little bit more detail if folks are interested. And then I think the other question was on how did I make the pivot,
Yeah,
and any tips for.
Curious. I'm very curious to hear about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say it wasn't very, smooth pivot. I think especially for me as someone that never even worked in a tech company, to make that pivot, it was very challenging. And for me, it kind of took, lots of trials and errors, redoing resume a lot of different ways, and then networking with a ton of people, to even kind of get the first chance of an interview. I think at the end of the day, if I had it's obviously there's much longer conversation, but if I had to summarize it, I think after you get your resume in a good point, networking really is key. And I think, just kind of think about who you're competing with. If you're kind of going for a PM role at, any established companies, you'll probably be competing with lots and lots of people that already have the PM title. So applying directly really doesn't help. So for me, I was really, really focused on networking with as many people as I can. And yeah, the response rate, wouldn't be super high, but for the folks who are willing to talk to you, and just by chance have openings on our team, that's usually where I have the most luck. And then once I have that first interview, after that, it's all kind of, up to how much you're able to prep and how much you're able to think on the spot and practice. But for me, I think the biggest hurdle was get that first interview. And kind of concretely, this opportunity at Amazon, it really came through a person that was networking with, and then she was really kind. She knew that there were some openings in her work, so she was actually in the payments work at Amazon. And then I was able to get a interview through that connection. And yeah, after that, it was the hiring manager was open-minded enough to get someone that doesn't have a traditional background a shot. And then one other thing I would say is also be pretty thoughtful on the types of product that you're going for. For example, I was focused on fintech, because I thought that from my finance background, I would be more suited for maybe a more traditional product manager, or maybe a product manager role specifically in the finance space, because I know that in those roles, the PM still need to have a pretty sharp understanding for how does P&L work, how do we make money, because for a lot of the financial products, that bottom line is super important, as was the case for my first team at Amazon. So I think that really helped me to narrow down my search and also get just a higher, at least the first interview response or interview rate.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's the domain knowledge does play some role, right, at the end of the day. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What were some of the how would you characterize the technical skills that a candidate may need to cultivate if she wants to transition into a tech PM role, assuming that she has a non-tech background? So what are some of the technical skills you recommend for someone who wants to transition into a tech PM role?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I would say that if you're currently not a PM, I would just focus on getting to that first, because, as you can see for me, I started with a traditional PM, and then at least internally transitioning from traditional to technical product manager at Amazon, I assume at most big tech is relatively straightforward. Or, obviously you need to be focused on, you still need to, be fighting or speaking up for yourself to really make that title change. But for me, I was super focused on that. I was able to make that work just within, even less than a year, which is pretty quick. So I would say, if you are just trying to get that first PM role, it's just really popular right now. It's harder to get that interview. So just land a PM role somewhere and then do a good job in that, and then make the transition. And then in terms of, once if you're already a PM and you want to work on kind of more technical products, and here I guess I want to do kind of a definition. Just want to define kind of what product, what technical PM mean for me, or me in the Amazon context, because that's just where my only experience be. So the Amazon, your traditional versus technical PM really doesn't really define like how your day is like. It's really just, it depends on what kind of product that you're working on. So if you're working on a technical product, for example, everybody in Alexa, everybody in AWS, you're essentially, AWS, your customer is usually technical people or engineers. So I think without having that, kind of be able to know what engineers want, that would be really challenging to be, to have that customer empathy in an org like AWS or any kind of B2B organization. And then for an org like Alexa, where most of our technology is powered by lots of machine learning and a lot of natural language processing, which are all kind of state-of-the-art technology. Everybody in our org are all technical product managers. And then for Amazon, for example, a lot of the org in the traditional retail org are more traditional PM roles. So it really just depends on how technical the product it really is. So yeah, coming back to the question on, if you are now a traditional PM, want to transition to a more technical PM role, I would say the easiest thing to do is really have a good understanding on what are the technical decisions that your current product is making, that maybe your tech lead or your senior engineers are making. Understand what those are, understand why those decisions are made, and understand how and why that impact customers. Because I think it's hard to say, there's a book or there's a kind of a training program that you can go through that really teaches you all the technical things that you need to know as a product manager. I personally think it's super hard, just because whatever product that you will end up joining, it will be like super specific, right? So I think really is like going like whatever product that you're working on now, even if it's not full-time, maybe just a side project, understand what are the technical decisions that are being made and why. I think will go a long way in just helping you develop that kind of technical mindset. And then in terms of like really hard technical skills, and kind of going back, I think the context here is someone that doesn't have the technical kind of background. I actually did study computer science back in undergrad, but after 4 years of finance, I really can't say how much I still remember from those times. And for me, the only time that I really write any kind of obviously super basic code is really just SQL. But I think overall, I think there's more the idea of not be afraid of numbers, being willing to learn all these new things, technical things if you need to is more important. But yeah, I think overall, I personally, I wouldn't stress about learning Python, SQL. I think if you have Python, C++, I think if you have time, the more technical you are, definitely the better that you can be, and you can be with your job and communicating with the engineers. But for me, it hasn't really been necessary.
Got it. How would you describe tech PM role differing from a traditional PM role? Specific examples could, I think you mentioned one example where depending on the product, you may have more technical work or you may have a technical inclination. I really like your expression of trying to understand the technical decisions being made as well in your previous response. So that's something we can emphasize on further, right? A lot of PMs tend to take the technical decisions from their technical leadership at the face value, and being able to understand the reasoning behind it, being able to maybe challenge it at times to be in alignment with customer needs could go a long way for the career, right? So what are some of the, going back to your difference between tech PM role and traditional PM role, is there any specific example that comes to mind that you would want to share with us?
Yeah. Again, my experience is based on the two teams that I do have experience in, but since I do have the two different titles, I think for me, I do notice a pretty big shift in the types of, one is the types of technology that we actually use. So when I was in payments, as you can imagine, a lot of it is on API integration with our external partners. So I still didn't know anything about just API, again, having not worked in just any tech companies at all. So I still had to learn that. And for me, that was interesting to learn. But compare that, which I think API integration is more or less pretty well defined. There's there's still different approaches to do it, but it's pretty set. Versus now coming to Alexa, a lot of the things that we do are just net new. There are new models coming out on, for example, what's the most efficient model for natural language processing, and there's always trade-off between precision recall, all that. So all that is really net new, and there's still like new things that are coming out just in the industry in general. So I find it really exciting that a lot of time, even as a product, I'm sometimes reading a lot of the newer research paper. I can't claim that I really understand every single thing that's saying, but I think it does require me to just keep up with what's the latest in the industry, because a lot of those times, those new things actually does impact the product roadmap. For example, if there's a new model that came out that we did some tests and ran our data on, and we realize it's actually more effective, or maybe it's reduces the latency without impacting precision, then that is potentially a model that we do want to pivot to. So in that case, we'll take that into consideration when we're building a product roadmap. Or we might, now this is a new improvement that we might consider making. We might have to do some prioritization trade-offs. So I think you need these constant learning of just newer technologies that really doesn't exist, or is really becoming more mature every day, isn't something that existed on my previous team. I'm sure as traditional PM, there's still tons of new things that can come in, but I think for me, I've really noticed that difference pretty significantly. So I think, that is kind of like probably another difference is here, you might be just constantly new things might be come in for you and also for the tech team to digest and learn. And that might actually have a pretty big impact on what the team actually do day to day. And then I think, in terms of another example of what the difference might be. So I think here, like a typical decision that I might get involved, a relatively technical decision that I might get involved in is, for example, there could be multiple algorithms to do the same thing, and they all have different trade-offs. So typically the tech team, the tech lead or the senior engineer might do some research and write like a really short doc and say, okay, here are the 3 models that we trained, that we tested on. Here are the preliminary results. Now we need to make a call on which one we should use. And usually there's different trade-offs on both how effective they are and also, what's the scope, how long does it take for us to really get there. So then as a PM, I need to understand that fairly quickly. And I think the key here is, again, like, I think the job for us is really to make sure that you understand the high level, and then when you don't, ask the critical questions, because sometimes the tech team might be really thinking about how to optimize the technology itself, and so like sometimes what's best for customer might not be there, or just when they're working on the doc, that might not be the first consideration. And then the product job is really to make sure that you're advocating for the customer. So a typical example might be, we could spend 3 months work on this really, really great thing, and that will be, so great for customer. But it will take this three months to get there. The customer won't really see any improvement for that amount of time, versus there's something incremental that we can do that's really a quick fix that might not be that elegant, but the customer can see this in 2 weeks. So that's a call that potentially a product person will need to make, and an engineer team might make a different decision. It's not to say that that's always right. So at that point you will have a debate. And so I think as a technical PM, I think I see more of that compared to in my previous role.
Wow, yeah. So it seems that based on what you're describing, it seems that technical curiosity is going to be one of the key traits of a successful tech PM. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the traits that you believe are critical, that you may have seen are critical for success as a PM. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. What are some of those traits?
Yeah, I think, definitely what you said. I think just be comfortable with learning new things. And I think, again, here, I think it's because I think our job isn't to, unless at some point folks all get, more specialized, and, when you're getting a job, you're probably really for that particular role. But I think for most of us earlier in our career, we're all relatively generalists. So we're just hard into the role to learn the technical skills that would learn all the specific domain knowledge that you need to be successful. So I think be comfortable having to learn new things constantly is one. And then I think I really think not be afraid of ask questions, and because I think it really is a product job to ask those questions on behalf of a customer to make sure that decision that we're made make the most sense or create the most value for customers. So yeah, I think it really isn't the product job to understand every line of code, but make sure that you understand enough so that you can pinpoint what are the maybe questions that the other stakeholders have missed is really key. Yeah, I would say those are probably the top two that's top on top of my head.
Thank you, Francis. You mentioned something very interesting. I made a mental note of it, which is um, a PM doesn't necessarily have to understand each line of code. They can just make recommendations based on the trade-offs for the customers, and then engineering team may or may not take that recommendation, right? So going back to that dynamic, what are some of the ways that you build partnership with your technical partners to be able to get their buy-in, to influence them, to be able to negotiate with them, and to create overall a successful product? What are some of your, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think number one thing I would say, especially as a new PM, which I think can be super daunting because you're new to the domain, even if you might join with many years experience, I think if you're joining with something that you haven't worked on before, then that's still net new, and you might feel like you're the least experienced in that sense on the whole team. So how do you build trust, and how do you make sure that at least the teams are taking into consider what you're saying? I feel like for me, the most helpful thing has been try to make myself hopeful as quickly as possible, and it can be just really small wins for myself. So example can be on my first team, which was really the first like tech and product job I've ever had. It was super daunting, but I quickly realized, the engineering team had been asking for a bunch of stuff from the product leadership, and there's been some miscommunication, and they've been a little bit stuck. So I quickly realized that's an opportunity where I can chime in, step in, and get what the tech team want, or at least be voice their opinions or voice their concerns to my leadership. That's something that sounds super simple, but just it wasn't done for whatever reason. And I think once that happens, I establish myself as someone that's on their side, or at least someone that they can talk to, that I can then kind of communicate that to our side of leadership. And I think that for me was a really small but a really effective quick win, that after that they feel really comfortable coming to me and ask for my opinion. And an example on my current team was I joined and I realized there's been a lot of back and forth. We're actually fighting out a specific decision with search team because our experience live on search team. So they are kind of the guardkeeper for whether we can launch our experience. And I quickly realized it's been going on for days and it's really not going anywhere. So then I stepped in and then made a huge escalation to make sure that we quickly unblock ourselves and involved our leadership and search leadership. And I realized quickly after that, the tech team felt like I'm definitely someone that can deliver and can execute. So I think after those quick events, I definitely feel like instead of just seeing me as a new person, they feel like I'm someone that they can trust, someone that they can deliver. So I think make yourself helpful. It doesn't have to be like in the technical sense. Just make yourself helpful in the general sense goes a long way. And then I think too, how do you make sure is, I think a lot of time I commonly get question of like, I don't know how to code. Can I still be a technical PM? I think again, the ability is really to, if you don't understand something, and it's really not your job to really understand all the code, but it's really ask your tech team, essentially trying to understand of all the and usually when they come to you, they're asking you for opinion or for a decision. And your job is really understand for all these different, approaches or possibilities, what really is an impact on customer. And then you make a call once you understand the pros and cons from the customer standpoint. And I think that really is a key. And I think that really is sometimes the view that the engineer might be missing or what they're coming to you to. And then one last thing is always speak with data if possible. I get it. If it's a completely new product, there might not be so much data to go off of, but I find it really hopeful that if I have intuition on something, if I can, do some work and then pull up real data to support that, or even just sometimes, a lot of times we're building something new, so there's no direct data, but maybe data from other teams or data from like similar products in industry that have public research on. that really usually is really hopeful, because then you're not just speaking like your own personal opinion and you're based your intuition on some real data. So I personally found kind of those three things have really helped me to build trust quickly and influence my engineer, even though, again, I'm someone that, I'm still pretty new in the PM journey and not someone that has previously been an engineer, which I think all the technical PM tend to be. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Francis. I really appreciate you sharing generously, and I've taken a lot of notes here. I'll be sharing this with our community as well, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with you over email or chat and continuing to learn from you. Thank you so much for enriching our community with your knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this is really a great community. So kudos to you guys to really build this up. And I think I think I mentioned to you when I was going through the pivot myself, I was in touch with some of the content here as well, which I found super helpful. So appreciate all the good work that you guys have done as well.
Wow, it's a small world. Everything comes around, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, very nice to meet you, Francis. Thank you again for sharing generously. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with you as I produce this, as I polish this up and I publish this in our community. I'll be sharing this with you and looking forward to staying in touch with you and, turn this into something bigger than both of us are.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for inviting me again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Francis. Take care. Enjoy your time
You too.
off.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.